It's a pleasure always speaking to you. And of course, you're going to tell us about yourself. Then you're going to tell us about the symposium. So please.
Okay. Well, good morning. Here it's morning, Vikram. I'm sure it's evening in your part of the world. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to the to this symposium on Indigenous mediation. Um, I'm humbled to be here. I still don't understand why I'm here, but okay, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Who am I? Basically, I'm Canadian. I'm a certified mediator. I've been a certified mediator since 2010. I'm also a civil servant. I work for the Government of Canada. Um, my training is I'm also a legal professional. So I started off in the legal profession and I found my way into mediation because it resonated with me, and I decided that I would like to do my practice to be a mediation within my work, whether professionally, whether it be in my personal professional, like as a consultant, or in my day-to-day job as a civil servant for the Government of Canada. Okay, so I've been privileged as a civil servant to work on different mandates. I have worked with Indigenous communities within my mandates as a civil servant, but I've worked on so many. I've really been privileged. I've worked on constitutional issues with official language with minority communities in the Canadian government. And within my mandates, I was for over 12 years, I was given a portfolio to work with Indigenous communities on Aboriginal files. But these kind of mandates that I had were mostly with respect to establishing and partnerships, working with they were establishing partnerships, working on agreements, treaties, treaty relations, and certain agreements that we had, which which derived from the treaty agreements, basically. So as a result of that, I've had the opportunity to go into the Indigenous communities to work and literally to go on the reserves. I work in the first of all, I work in the Quebec region. Okay, there's a national capital region, which is Ottawa, and I'm not far from there. But my designated region as a civil servant is the province of Quebec, and it's a huge province. It's quite big. The northern parts is really almost there's the Inuits, and so I've been able to go on reserves, closer, like southern part of Quebec, and also more northern. And I've had the privilege of sitting down with chiefs, with community elders within my work. And because of that, because of these mandates, like I said, I've been exposed, and I had to take a lot of awareness sessions, to understand to become aware of the culture. Because I'm not an expert, okay, so that I can adapt. I can adapt when I go on, when I meet with our partners, and we're going there and we're visiting. We're guests on their reserves, even though it's just strange the way the system is. It's part of colonization because we colonized basically their territories, and so when I go and meet with them, I had to adapt to their ways and their customs, and it was quite humbling, I have to say. Very humbling experience. I'm also a certified community mediator. I've recently started doing that, which is because most of my practice is in interest-based mediation, my professional practice, but interest-based mediation, civil and commercial. But I'm also a certified community mediator, and I find that the two different practices, the two approaches, they help me, to adapt if I have to let's say devise or when I have to assess the needs of a client, especially when when I had to deal with when I was working with Indigenous communities. The community mediation aspect actually was very helpful for me, that mindset, so that I can adapt to their needs, because it's a different approach, as you know, as you may be aware of. It's more based on dialogue and relationship, whereas the interest-based is more based on results, and it's a different structure, So what are okay? So I also come with a background of I worked at the United Nations also as a legal officer in the treaty section. Okay, so that's why I was given when I returned to Canada. That's why I was mandated with working with treaty issues, because I had already worked in at the UN at the treaty section in international treaties, and so I was well versed in drafting treaties and basically what went into the structure of and the logistics of preparing negotiating and preparing a treaty, because I that was the basis of my work at the UN, and that was quite fascinating. But at that time, when I was working at the United Nations, I was really working with different member states of the UN. That was quite a fascinating experience, and that also shaped my mindset, my career. It was very enriching. So I find I come with my law background, my mediation training, and the work that I do at the Canadian government. Everything just comes together. I find that every experience that I've had has basically added, has helped me, to in my mandates, and I've leaned on what I've learned from the different work that I've done, and the experience and the education that I've had, basically.
So, Rosalia, with all that, you're saying, why I don't know why I'm here. That's that's why you are here.
Oh yeah. I've also okay. I forgot to mention. I had the privilege also of working with, but it was a short mandate, with the Indian Residential Schools Adjudication Secretariat. This was at the time with Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. At that time, because of my background, I was asked. I did a secondment, we call it. Like, I was there for a short period of time. Basically, my work was to go and find, consultants from the Indigenous community, so that they could give awareness courses to civil servants like myself. Okay, because we come in. Look at me. I'm white. I'm Caucasian. I'm North American. I'm not Indigenous. I don't have Indigenous blood, and here I am. I have to go into an Indigenous community. I mean, how? I'm coming in with a different mindset, okay, and I have to understand the culture, okay. So I was tasked, okay, with basically finding consultants so that they can give courses to us, to civil servants in different departments on Indigenous practices. So that was a fantastic mandate. I really loved it. I had so much fun because I met with, I had the privilege of meeting with some residential school survivors. There's a few that were still, some are actually getting on age, and some are children of survivors, or they would be the descendants. But when they told me their stories, I was very moved. I would sit there. I mean, I still remember when I would meet with them, and a meeting that should have taken an hour and a half maximum, sometimes would take 3 hours, 4 hours, and I would just sit there and I would just listen. It was a humbling experience for me because I had to set aside my let's say structured way of working. Like, okay, you have a meeting of 1 hour. Okay, you sit down and okay, you ask specific questions. No, it just didn't work that way. I would start with one question, and it could take hours, and then I would have to meet up with them, on another date, so that they continue their story, because I realized that they needed to tell their stories, and then we needed to I was trying to fit something, in like a square peg in a round hole, sort of. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense because it was a different mindset. It was a different way of thinking, and I realized that very quickly. And I still remember when I went back to my directors, I would say, well, this is going to take a lot of time, because you can't expect someone that has that kind of story, that kind of experience, to spill it out within an hour. And then, we start preparing, a course structure. It doesn't make sense. You have to give it time. You have to take your time. You have to listen, and we need to adapt to their way of thinking and their experience. So this is, and I was lucky because I had a lot of openness from my director. Said, okay, take all the time you need. So I remember I would sit down with some of these, some of these they had become consultants, okay, and then I would say, I would have them tell their story, and I said, okay, so how do you think we could fit this into an awareness session? So that was like, and that's when I was starting to get exposed to Indigenous practices, Indigenous way of thinking, and it was completely different to what I was used to what I'm used to, and what I'm trained to do. I'm coming from a structured business-like environment, and I'm going into community-based culture, a different culture. So it was a wonderful learning experience. So that was one of my experiences.
But Rosalia, you have to tell us about the symposium also, because that part of it, as to what you have, if you've seen any of the sessions, what the symposium is about, anything that you want to tell us, because that's also important to get an introduction from you on the symposium.
Okay. Well, the symposium, I've had I've had the opportunity to listen to John Bocage's presentation, as well as Lorelei Higgins, and I have to say, Vikram, I'm so impressed. Well, also Ken Cloke, I wasn't able to listen to all the his inaugural presentation, but he's fantastic. I mean, I just enjoy listening. I feel like I'm learning. I feel like I'm getting a free university course.
Absolutely, actually.
I think that the symposium is a wonderful opportunity for anybody who's interested in literally learning about Indigenous peoples and mediation practices. I mean, if you want to get an inkling of what type of practices they have, I would strongly suggest, listening to the speakers and taking your time. Like, I'm glad that you're recording the sessions, so that I obviously many of us work during the day, so we don't have time to listen live while you're interviewing the speakers. But I find that when I take the time and I listen to the recordings, I always glean something from them. I was listening to John Bocage's 2 presentations, and I was so impressed by the level, the expertise, and I would love to sit down with your speakers in a room, and just ask them questions. It's how many speakers have you had so far? Over 30?
Yeah,
think?
I think that totally about, I think 30, totally 35. I think they must have done 30 by now. No, you were speaker number 25 or 26, I think. What did I, yeah.
Okay.
So
I
I think there'll be about 30 at the end of the day.
Well, your last speaker is when? In August 30th?
Yeah, no, the 30th is the last. I mean, yeah, 31st morning, we'll have the last speaker. Sarah Blake is from Australia. And then after that evening, 7 o'clock my time, we'll have a session on the learnings and key takeaways, which you have to be part of. So I hope you'll be able to take.
Which I have to.
Yeah, because look, I hope you'll be able to see other sessions also, and then what you felt came out of that, because that's important. What people, that's why I'm asking you about the symposium also, is how are people perceiving it? What are they picking up from it? It also gives me some indicator on to what I have to do next year, because next year I want it to be much larger. Let's get people from every corner of the world. So this was, of course, I mean, like I keep saying, I mean, there wasn't enough time to put it out because the conference was happening and immediately after that. But this is a series. I just want to, it's like getting basic inputs so that there is some structure about where we are moving. And that's why the next symposium on colonization, decolonization, and mediation. Then next year, let's do a much larger aspect. And yeah. Okay,
what I'm getting from it, okay, what I realize, I find that we can learn from each other, first of all, okay? And what I'm realizing, I see interconnections, although it's fascinating that you have speakers from all over the world. There's a lot of similarities in the practices, whether it be from Canada or Argentina or Australia, in the indigenous culture. But at the same time, what I find fascinating is how we can learn from each other. And I find that there's a need for mediators like myself who practice mediation. I don't practice in indigenous communities because I'm not indigenous, so I would not feel first of all qualified and well versed to go. And I am going to speak about a mediation that took place on a reserve. And that was what shaped that helped to shape my mindset. But I wouldn't feel comfortable, let's say, to do a mediation which would which would entail indigenous practices. Okay, I wouldn't feel authentic. That's the word that I would use for myself. Okay, because I'm not indigenous. If I had to go and do an intervention now, today, on a community reserve, I would have an indigenous mediator with myself. Yeah, there's no way I would walk in there. I'm not qualified. I don't represent their culture, and I know I would meet up with resistance. This is what. So what I feel like from your what I'm hearing from your symposium is that we need to, we learn from each other, and there's an opportunity here to create some kind of, to learn from each other and also create not an indigenous practice. I wouldn't say that. It's like too simplistic.
No, what I'm doing, I'll make it simple. I'll make it simple for you. What I'm doing is I'm creating this world mediation circle under which I'm creating mediation circles. So one circle is, which I'm creating, is Indigenous Peoples Mediation Circle. So we'll all, people who are interested to learn and also practice in that area, will come together, just have those discussions. Because Alicia Quinn is also a speaker. I think she was speaker, I mean, in the first week. So she did a co-mediation with John Bukaj. So she's
Okay.
spoken about that entire process, how they went about it. So have a look at that. So exactly what you're saying, that you would feel comfortable with the Indigenous
No,
mediator. So have a look at that.
no, I would, if you see, I have an experience which lasted a few months, okay, almost a year. Okay, it was that's what I wanted to, and that was for me was the eye opener. Because I was working with Indigenous communities, in my mandates as a federal civil servant at that time, I had the arrogance of putting, Indigenous communities and stuff, on my profile. Okay, and today I wouldn't do that. Okay, I realize, my God, there's so much I don't know. How can I, that was like the colonial mindset. That's what I would say. I wouldn't consider myself an expert in Indigenous practice. I'm learning. Okay, I've been exposed through my work um, to some of their practices, some, not all. Okay, and I would never, at this time in my life, say that at this point in my life, say that I'd be an expert. I'm a mediator. Yes, I'm certified. But because, like I said, I was traveling a lot to Indigenous communities at the time on the reserves. I was meeting with chiefs. I was negotiating with them in treaty based negotiations. I did have to deal with conflicts between communities, but this was based on it wasn't based on community. It was based mostly on contracts. It was with the North American mindset. That's what I was going in there with. I was going in there with an agreement. Okay, I was walking in with an agreement. I was sitting at the table with the chiefs, and sometimes there were elders and some community leaders, and we'd be sitting there and we'd say, we'd be looking at the terms of a contract, and if there were disputes, we'd be ironing it out. But it was with an interest-based approach. It was not with an Indigenous-based approach, community approach. That's I have to make that very clear, But all that being said, because of the fact that I was doing this type of work, okay, and I was not forced, but I was required, to learn a lot about Indigenous culture. So I was sent to awareness sessions. I don't know if you've heard of a blanket exercise. I'm sure some of your speakers may have spoken about a blanket exercise.
This was, no, I mean.
You know what a blanket exercise is,
No.
Vikram?
No. I wouldn't know. I mean, once you tell me, maybe I would have heard about it, but please.
They're probably going to bring it. Okay, if you have a symposium on colonialism, they're going to bring it up for sure.
about the blankets which were distributed on that aspect?
No,
okay.
It's not a dispute. Okay, what it is basically the Indigenous communities have this. It's an awareness. They have like this map on the ground. I mean, I did this I had to go do this at a local university, but it was all with Indigenous leaders, community leaders. Basically, they put blankets all over the floor, okay, and it represents. Let's say here I'm in Canada, North America, okay. It's when the Europeans came and colonized North America, okay, because most Canada is Indigenous land. Okay, if you look at from coast to coast, okay, and we've taken away their best land, not only in Canada but also the United States. I've realized that when I go down to the States, especially the beautiful beach areas, and I see sometimes I see Indigenous names and the original names like from the different communities, Abenakis and it's just I realize like how we've come and we've taken their land basically. So when the Europeans arrived here in North America, when they were discovering, they were going all over the world and colonizing, they would come in and they would bring disease, because they would be traveling for months on ships. So they'd come in and a lot of them were sick. Okay, so here you have a community that's been living on this land for centuries, and Europeans coming in, first of all, fighting with them many times and killing off a lot of them, and or if not, they would just sit and take over a portion of their land, but they would also bring their diseases with them, and so that would kill them off. They because they were exposed, they had no immunity. They were never exposed to the diseases that the Europeans would be carrying with them from another continent. So it killed off a lot of members of their community. So this is the blanket exercise was basically you'd walk on blankets, okay, and as you're walking, they're showing it goes through a process by a year, okay. In let's say 1600, the first ship arrived. Okay, so this was the territory. You could see that the size of the territory of the indigenous communities was big, was quite big. Okay, and as the Europeans started arriving, the territory keeps getting smaller and smaller. So they keep putting a blanket, and at the end, a territory which is, let's say, a whole room ends up being maybe 2 feet. Okay, because the rest of it has been taken over by the European colonizers. Either has been taken over, or many of the communities have disappeared because they've died from exposure to these diseases, that were brought over by the Europeans. So what I remember when I did this exercise, I think I was one of the only North American, Caucasians in the room, and it was quite revealing. It was very moving because it was facilitated by obviously Indigenous leaders. So I didn't realize the extent of the effect of colonization until that moment. I still remember when I returned to my office the next day, and I was explaining this to my colleagues. I was saying, you guys should try this. You should take this, do this exercise. It's going to give you an indicator of the mindset. Now I understand when we go into the community why there's resistance. Like, we're seen as the colonizers, especially as government officials. We're not very well trusted. So you have to basically create that trust. You have to earn it. Okay, and it's very humbling. So you can't go in with the same attitude that with the same mindset as if you're walking into a regular business meeting, with another one of your partners or stakeholders, like where you sit down at the table, okay, and you get down to business. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You have to earn the trust of because you're going into their community. It's their home, basically. It's like you basically inviting me into your home, and I come in and I do as I please. It doesn't work that way. So this is what I've realized, and so it's been very humbling. It's been a great learning experience and extremely humbling, like I can say,
But can I just make the connection between the blanket and the disease? Someone did speak about a particular community where blankets laced with the virus, smallpox virus, was distributed in that community to finish them off. So that someone did speak about.
Pardon?
That blankets were distributed in a particular indigenous community which was laced with the smallpox virus to finish them off.
That's right.
So that, I'm just connecting the blanket to the disease that you had spoken about. that they actually did that. That's what someone had spoken about. That things like
Okay.
that were also done. So imagine what all is in people's mind, what all they've heard, the stories, because this was, I think, someone did speak about a mediation which was happening where this person had heard this in her community from her grandmother and everything, that this happened in our community. So all that baggage that she had when she came into a mediation, and how that had to be taken care of, and how someone put a chair, empty chair, to say this is a chair of the ancestors, and that baggage that comes in, that was also part of this process. So that was interesting. I mean,
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can tell you that when I would go to the communities, I was also, I remember because like I said, I had to iron out a lot of disputes within between sometimes it was between chiefs, different chiefs, or a chief and some community leaders. So we had to do consultations, okay? But it wasn't the type of consultations that we were used to with our other stakeholders. What I remember is organizing this with one of the community leaders, and we had a talking stick. This for me was fantastic. We were sitting in a room in a circle, because the circle is very important. I think a lot of your speakers, your previous speakers, have mentioned the circle, and you obviously. I'm glad, Vikram, that you've included a circle in your, in your symposium.
No, that's my world mediation circle. That part of it is, of course, like I told you, tell you about it later. The idea is to create those circles, and that's why I'm saying that circle part is really important. So yes, the circle.
Because everything is, I think Jean Bosage, he mentioned it. Everything is, it revolves around the circle. Okay, it's a circle of life, basically. The earth, Mother Earth. I mean, this is what I've realized. Everything is there. There's spirituality in all their interactions. Okay, they're very spiritual. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is that. Yeah.
It's not just the circle, the circle of the world, but it's also the community it's the circle. It's never ending. It's a family, basically, and everyone is interrelated. So I remember going in. We had to hold a consultation. Okay, so we had to sit down. It's like, okay, we have to figure out what are your needs. How are we going to address these needs? And you tell us what you need. Okay, but before we could do that, I was privy to ceremonies, smudging ceremonies. I was like, you had to go in with an open mind. And I still remember my colleagues were saying, Rosalie, you're gonna be exposed to their culture. I said, okay, I'm open to it. It's fine. I'll learn. As long as I don't have to smoke a pipe. Because I don't smoke, because, and I mean, I never had to do that, but I do know of previous colleagues that did sign something, and they smoked a pipe at the end of the signing ceremony with the chiefs. Okay.
But people don't get offended. They don't get offended if you don't smoke the pipe.
I'm not, well, I mean, I wasn't, I never was, I was never exposed to it, but I guess it depends on who you're with and the relationship that you have with the community leaders that you're with, and with the chiefs. But we have very good relations. So no, I don't think so. They were very open-minded. I mean, I've had a lot of fun, like actually, when I would go to the Indigenous reserves and their communities, I used to look forward to those trips, because it wasn't a one-day trip. I'd be going because I had to go to some northern parts of Quebec, so I had to fly out there, and you have to stay overnight in a hotel room, and the meetings usually you can't finish everything in one day, because you have to take your time. That you're in a different mindset. So sometimes it would be meetings which would 3-day meetings, but it was fun. It was like going and visit family because they were so welcoming all the time.
But
Very welcoming.
but Rosalia, that's like my shows. When you come here, there's no concept of time.
No, there's no concept of time. There's no concept of time, and that was why, I was the reason why I was selected to work on those mandates is because I'm pretty easygoing. My director saw that, like, you're easygoing. You adapt. Would you be willing to do that? Yeah, sure. I love to learn. And that comes also from my Italian background, the concept of family. I said, okay, no problem. Sit around the table and break bread together, share a meal, and that's what I found. Okay, I would go to the communities. Okay, and the way to break through was usually through breaking bread, basically eating together. You don't just sit down and get down to business. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to establish a relationship. You really have to take your time. Okay. So I was open to that. I said, fine, I don't have a problem with that. And I enjoyed it. I actually, they're the best experiences that I've had they're some of the best experiences that I've had in my government career as a civil servant. And I don't go in there with that, with the civil servant hat and, very rigid. No, you have to set that aside. And, you go in like as a friend, basically, and you sit down and you discuss issues openly and with an open mind. So there was the first time I was exposed to the circle with the talking stick was in one of these consultations. So I mean, I still remember when we had to prepare the meeting. I was on the phone with that. I said, well, how do you want us to hold this consultation? I mean, what would be the best way? So they came out, they told us, well, why don't we just do, a meeting with, in the room. I'll facilitate it. We'll start with the talking stick. I had no idea what a talking stick was. I had to learn. So I said, okay, fine. Walk me through it. So they explained it to me and they facilitated it. So basically we were sitting in a circle and, they always start with a prayer, which I find very, it just sets the tone. Like it just centers you. It's all about centering, it's all about really, venerating also Mother Earth and like the place, basically the sky, the earth, the sun. It was just, I was fascinated. I'd be there and I'd be, wow, this is just so enriching. What a beautiful experience. It's so calming. It's just you put all your stress aside and all the structure that you have, like, okay, I have to do this is what I have to get done. I have to get this done. No, you take that and you set it aside. It's like, and you let everything flow. You let the conversation flow. You go with the flow, basically. So that's what I enjoyed. For me, it was like going on a retreat. I loved those meetings. I just enjoyed them so much, And then when I go back to the office, I said, okay, when I sit down at my desk, then I would start writing my reports, and I realized, wow, that was amazing. That was like a vacation. They were great meetings. I really enjoyed them. So we'd be in the room and somebody would give us a stick, and when whoever had that stick was able to, it was their turn to talk. Nobody interrupted, and they were able to express their feeling, like express what was going on, why, let's say, we had a subject, let's say, why we didn't agree on how we saw, what was our vision, how we saw this relationship going forward, and and you would think that, oh no, this is, somebody looking in from the outside that has that North American or colonial mindset would say, what is going on here? But there is structure there, believe it or not, and you're moving forward. You're really moving forward. It's community, and that was the best consultation I was ever involved in, because you're getting to the core, the heart of the matter. How you want to know what what you want to understand what our needs are. You want to do a needs assessment. That's how you're going to do it. And it was true. It was very effective. I realized that when I went back, when I returned to the office and I started writing my report, I was like, you know what? I see what the issues are. This is what came out. There's a trend here. I'm seeing this being repeated. So this is what needs to be addressed. It's this issue. So I realized that I had learned more than I thought I did. Yep. So I went with these type of experiences. It prepared me for mediation, which I was involved in a few years ago. Okay. Now this mediation, what happened was there was a case. It was on a reserve. It was a reserve, not, I live in Montreal, not far from here. Okay. It was a big case. Okay. And basically, I was mandated by it was a case involving peacekeepers. Okay. They were, they're what they would call the local police force on the reserve. Okay. And there would be the equivalent of for what the Canadian government would call the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but on the reserve, on an Indigenous reserve, police officers. Basically, there was an altercation. There was a Christmas party, and there was a lot of drinking that had been going on, and someone was a little bit inebriated, and there was a discussion that happened at someone's house. They were all there. They had congregated. It was a Christmas party, and the discussion became heated. And because there were underlying issues in their work environment, there was some bad blood between a few of the officers, and the discussion became very heated. And at one point, there was an altercation between two of the officers. Okay, and one of them was actually the chief, not the chief, was the boss of one. It was boss of one of them. And unfortunately, because it was the altercation wouldn't be what you would consider something extremely violent, but it was an altercation nonetheless. And it was so the boss basically ended up arresting the colleague. This was like, it was, here you have police officers being arrested by another police officer, basically, a peacekeeper, which is the equivalent of a police officer in front of their colleagues. It was a very difficult, it was unheard of. It was really unheard of. And because of the situation, that person was arrested, was put in handcuffs and brought to the station. Imagine, being, put in a cell by his colleagues, okay, that he works with every day, who do this on a day-to-day basis. You can imagine the humiliation. You can imagine, it just didn't make sense, okay? So it affected the morale of the whole force, and it really affected the morale. It affected their job performance, to the point where some officers quit. They left the force and they went on to take on other jobs elsewhere in other reserves or other or they came into the they left the reserve altogether and they took on jobs as officers in the as with the RCMP, because they're trained. These guys were trained the same way as RCMP officers, where they have their same training, exact same training. Okay. So I was called in by, there was a meeting that was held by the chiefs on the reserve, and they decided, okay, there needs to be, something has to be done because the morale of the force is down. But how are we going to address this? So they said, well, they have local mediators on the reserve, but the local mediators, they did not want to be involved. And the reason why was because everybody's related. So they said, we can't mediate where we have someone is our cousin, is our neighbor. We see these people every day. We're not impartial. We need somebody from the outside. Okay. So given my profile that I understood a little bit, I was exposed a little bit to Indigenous culture. I was solicited for my services, okay, by the director of legal services. So I remember when I was solicited, I was scratching my head and I was saying, well, you have mediators that are, you have mediation services on the reserve. I don't understand why you're reaching out to me. I'm not Indigenous. And they were saying, well, that's exactly why we're reaching out. We need someone from the outside. We really need somebody that's impartial. And so I explained, but I'm not well versed with, mediation practices. I've been exposed, to some of your culture by, my interactions through my other work, through my work in government, in my dealings, but not as a mediator. I have to be honest, And they said, well, that's perfect because you're going to come in with fresh eyes. Okay. So I went. Well, first of all, I had to take time off from my because this was a consultation. I was doing this as a consultant outside of my my work, my 9-to-5 work as a civil servant. So first, I had to go and get the approval to be able to work, to go work with these partners. I said, well, you do realize that we do have dealings with you in my department, and I'm just wondering if this would cause a problem. I had to expose all this, under ethical grounds. Okay, as I said, does that cause a problem for you? And I also had to go and speak. I had to get the approval to take a leave of absence from my work, my 9-to-5 work, to go do this. And I was given the green light, basically, because we had never worked with this particular unit. We didn't have direct dealings. So I had to put that out, in the open air, basically. So once I had that green light, I was going on the reserve, and I remember when I went for the first meeting, and I sat down with the director of the legal services, and he started explaining the case. Okay, so I started asking, the regular question: how many people are on the force, and blah 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 blah, and whatever. And next thing you know, I realized, I have a feeling this is going to be a big case. There seems to be a systemic issue. So what I did was I solicited the help of another mediator, let's say an elder, a co-mediator, okay, which I think was the best thing I could have done, because I had a feeling. I said, you know what, this is not going to be an open and shut case. It's not going to be because he wanted me to mediate between the parties, and I realized there was minimum 4 parties in the altercation, and then when I said, well, let me meet with the first one, the first party. And when I started speaking to the first person, I realized, my God, this is not just a mediation. There needs to be healing that has to be done. It's going to be a long process. So I said, I can't do this alone. There's no way. And it's going to take a couple of months. So I realized I needed help. So I solicited the help of, like I said, another mediator, very experienced, whom I would consider a mentor for me. And it was the best decision I could make. So I still remember when we were going on the reserve on a day-to-day basis. And because these were peacekeepers, they work in shifts. So we had to meet with them either, between their shifts or before a shift or at the end of a shift. So it could be in the morning, it could be in the afternoon, or it could be in the evening. Sometimes we would find ourselves on the reserve till 11 o'clock at night. We'd be there, let's say we'd meet with them at 5 in the evening, because they said, no, my shift finishes at 5. But our meetings would never last an hour. They would last with each individual from 3 to 4 hours, and then we'd have also we'd have to continue, because it was so much. I mean, we realized the process was not a traditional mediation. It was not the linear. It was not the interest-based mediation that process that we're used to, and let's say in a business environment, in a civil or commercial mediation. It was a different process. So we had to adapt, okay? And we realized it would take time. So I remember going back to the director, from the legal office, and telling him, listen, if you think this is an open and shut case, it isn't. It's going to take a while. If you want us to really get to the root of the problem and start addressing the issues, it's going to take a while. We're going to have to meet with most of the people on the force, because everybody wants to meet with us. After the first day, we already had a list of 50 people that we had to meet with. 50. Okay. It was unbelievable. I mean, people were open. Some, they were open to meeting with us. And I still recall the first meetings, okay, because I had to adjust also my manner of working as a mediator, because I was going in with again the North American interest-based mediation, the way I was trained, basically. As a civil commercial mediator, I was going in with that mindset, and it wasn't working. I still remember the first one of the first meetings, the initial meetings with one of the peacekeepers. First of all, they gave us a conference room that we could use, okay, and there were 4 long tables, like a square. And we were sitting at one side, and we placed a chair on the other side. So we were facing each other. It didn't work. I still remember one of the peacekeepers coming in, and he was kind of defiant. Okay. This really marked me. He was a little defiant because he came in full uniform after a shift, and he literally, he was like he was trying to see how far I was going to go, how I was going to react, and also my partner. And he placed his feet on the table in front of us. I was like, okay, So I was like, what's wrong with this picture, So I looked at him and said, as I was very sarcastic, because I'm coming from an Italian family. And I look at my meat and I'm like, okay. So I said, oh, make yourself at home, Sure, make yourself comfortable, Are you tired? You had a long shift, And I realized that was the wrong approach. You don't do that. It's like, he was basically trying to rile me up. and he did. He basically did. I was like, what is this? I felt disrespected, and I was like, no, this is not going to work. So I just looked at my partner. I said, let's take a break here. So then I realized, I said, what's wrong with this picture? We're not doing this correctly. You know what? I don't think we could use, we realized that the two of us, we started discussing, and we're like, we can't approach this with the same mindset. We can't approach this process, although, we cannot approach this process with the same mindset that we would have, let's say in a civil or commercial dispute, in a boardroom. No, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Okay. And so we started, and I was telling him, if we sit down here with our papers, right, taking notes down, it's going to put them on the defensive, because they're going to feel like they're going to the principal. We had this feeling like they looked like they were going to the principal's office, to get, basically reprimanded. So we're like, no. So what we did was we changed our approach. So when we started meeting with them, the first questions we asked was, do you want to be here? Like we explained who we were, we explained what our mandate was. And we said, does that pose an issue for you? Like the fact that we're here, that we were asked, and where are you, do you feel like you're forced to be here? Because you're not, this is a voluntary process, and this is what we're aiming. And, we felt that we had to explain ourselves, we had to change, we had to adapt to them. Okay. So we had to obtain their trust, basically. That's what it was. So we spent the first, I would say at least the first month, just working on obtaining their trust, basically, because they knew, they had done their research. I mean, these are police officers. Okay. So they had done their research. They knew my background inside out. They knew who I was. They knew that I was coming in, that I was a civil servant. So they didn't trust me right off the bat. So I said, does that pose a problem for you? Because I'm not coming in as a civil servant. Right now, I'm coming in as a private citizen. I'm a consultant. I'm a mediator. I'm not coming in as the Canadian government. I had to explain this to them for my part. And my colleague, same thing. I mean, he was a private mediator. And, we're here if you want our help. If you don't, I mean, you're free to leave anytime. And, we explained the process. We went through the whole thing. And we also changed. What we realized was like, no, you know what? We have to change the way the room is. We can't work in this kind of structure. So what we did was we put the tables aside, and we said, okay, what would be best is we just put three, the chair, because we'd meet one-on-one with them. So we'd put three chairs in the middle, in a corner, like when we'd sit in a circle, sort of, just sit down. And we put aside our notes. We wouldn't even take notes. We would just listen. That's what we did. We said, no, this is going to be a dialogue. That's it. It's going to be, if you want to talk, like we completely had to change our process. And for me, it was challenging, because I had to adapt to a new way of working. And my biggest fear was, well, what if I don't remember everything that was said? And we have to prepare a report and whatever. Because what happened was it ended up becoming like fact finding. We prepared a report, and then we made recommendations, because we realized we couldn't move to mediations right away to sit down. We had to prepare. We had to figure out. We needed to do a needs assessment. We had to figure out what were the needs, and from there devise a plan. Like if we needed to do there were mediations that had to take place between certain individuals, but for others there needed to be coaching that had to be done. There needed to be awareness sessions. Like it was a combination of processes that had to come together in the end. After that was our recommendations, and then we would get on to the processes. That's why it took so many months. We really had to adapt. And what I do remember is that when we would meet with the individuals, some of them we met with at in this room, like in this conference room at their headquarters, but others didn't want to meet there. We met. Oh, that was the running joke between my colleague and I. We're flexible. We'll meet you anywhere. So we met in restaurants, we met in parks, we met at their homes. Yes, we met at their homes. I've never been so welcome. We would meet in their homes on the reserve. And what was funny was to find their homes was another issue for us because we're used to we're coming from a big city where you have the names of the streets and the addresses. Well, there's no address. So okay, how are we going to find your house? Oh, okay. So when you're on the main highway, you're going to turn right after 100 meters, and you're going to see a cement truck. Okay, where there's that cement truck, then you're going to go another 100 meters, and then you're going to turn left. Okay, did you get that? So it was an adventure. Every meeting we had to go to was an adventure, but we had a lot of fun. I never had so much fun, and I never learned so much at this mediation. Actually, this whole process. This whole process, that case, I think it was one of the best cases I ever had, to date. Okay. I learned so much. I had so much fun. And even, meeting with the individuals, like we met with all kinds of characters. I mean, everybody had something specific, and they would tell us their stories. There was one meeting that we had, which for me was very moving. I still remember. It was in the person that one of the main characters. I would say characters. One of the person that had been arrested. Okay, he came from his father had been the chief of that reserve, and his grandfather in the past. Okay. No, the chief of police. What am I saying? His grandfather was a chief. So he was very proud of his heritage. Okay, so I still remember we met in his home, and that was a difficult meeting because, the humiliation that he felt, with being arrested in front of his peers. Okay, I can't begin to describe it. Okay, so I remember being in his home, and he was showing us pictures of his ancestors, and it was just amazing. I was like, he brought out a scrapbook, and he's showing us all these pictures, and in full regalia, and ceremonies, and he's explaining all this. So I remember, my partner and I were like, okay, let's go with the flow. Let's the first time we went to meet with him, we realized, he needed to express himself. He needed to tell us who he was, what it was part of his identity had been affected. What we realized, it was his identity. He was really, the root problem was that he was humiliated because of who he was in the community. That he was so respected. He came from his family was well respected, and it was a humiliation for him. The whole incident. So for us, I still remember being in his home, and him opening up to us, and explaining his story. I found it very moving because you see this big, tough, peacekeeper, and these guys are big. They're huge. They're and they would tell us also the type of cases that the type of cases that they would have, and they would give us they would explain to us the type of work that they did in their day-to-day lives. It's a tough job, and they're very strong-minded. I gained so much respect for them, and they became like our friends. I still remember and when we would go into the reserve, people would say hi to us. They knew who we were, even though we didn't know who the people were, but everyone of the reserve knew who these two white persons coming in, on a daily or weekly basis, or those are the two mediators coming in. Because we would eat at the local restaurants. We'd go in, sometimes, because sometimes we'd be there for a full day. So let's break for lunch, or let's go have dinner at the local brasserie or whatever, the restaurant. And they knew who we were, so we had to be also, we couldn't discuss the details of our discussions, the cases when we were when we were on the reserve. There was no way, because other people would be there, and they would they'd hear us. So we had to be we had to be a little bit more discreet, like in our discussions and our conversations. But I mean, everybody would say hi to us, and then we were like, wow, this is a wonderful community. So it was an amazing experience. It lasted, because we had to interview over 50 people, and like I said, it was based on their availability and also our availability. I would have to take time every time. I would have to take pockets of time off from work, and go there and put on my mediator hat. So it took a few months, it was just an amazing experience. That's all I could say. So at the end of this, we prepared. We did a needs assessment. We sort of took on the role of like an ombudsman would do. We prepared a report. We made recommendations, and then we had to get the approval to start implementing those recommendations. The type of interventions that we could do, and so it took a few months before we could actually start the mediation process. Okay. So the mediation process that we did between 4 individuals was interest-based. It was not community-based mediation. But what we realized was that there was a need for the community to heal. Okay. So there was a need for more of Indigenous type of community mediation intervention. So for that, we couldn't provide that because we weren't well versed in that. So we needed to for them to find the proper resources, which would be the type of Indigenous mediators, someone that not from within their community, but from outside their community that had Indigenous roots, basically.
But Rosalia, it basically starts from that whole basic colonial concept of handcuffing and putting people in cells. When are we going to be able to get over that? It's become part of the countries as if this is a normal thing to do. It's the worst thing to do. How can you do that to someone innocent until proven guilty? Where has that gone? It's really.
You know what? You just hit the nail on the nose. You just pegged it. That's exactly the humiliation that person. That's what he was on sick leave. That person was on sick leave for 6 months because of that humiliation, because he was handcuffed before his peers, okay, and put in that cell, okay. His peers, they couldn't look him in the eyes. Can you imagine having to handcuff your partner, okay, and put him in the cell that you're putting somebody else in? That's exactly what he was telling me. That's what he was telling us. He felt the cage, like he couldn't. He had nightmares because of that. That's exactly it. You can't. You're using a colonial mindset. It's like it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
He was sick because of that. It caused him so much distress.
Yeah. This whole colonial methods, you actually in a way convicted the person. Even for a day, if you've convicted the person, if you put the person behind bars even for a few hours, and an innocent person what is the whole criminal justice system then? What are you doing it for? You've already, in a way, given him a certain punishment. So I think that we'll take up also in that symposium next month on colonization, decolonization, because in the process of saying that it's not a colony anymore, you have still kept practices. And that definitely has affected dispute resolution for sure. So we'll discuss that. I mean, I won't take it up here, but yes, these are important things we need to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's because you're going exactly. You're going from you're applying exactly a Western practice, okay, to a community that's been there for God knows, how many thousands of years, okay, that have based, that their historical, their customs, and they have what they have powwows. Yeah, I mean they still practice, like their customs also on the reserve, okay, but they're living in a modern world, okay, but they're living with they're trying to basically um, adapt, they're practicing their old customs but in a modern world, so it's a conundrum there, you know
Yes.
how do you how do you basically find the right fit, like how do you you know how do you compromise there, where's the middle point,
I
and
think
that
no, I
that
think
was what we had to see. This is what my colleague and I were confronted with, okay, this is what we were confronted with throughout this whole process, was like, okay, we're doing interest-based mediation, this is our mindset, okay, now how do we adapt it to a culture which doesn't think the same way, okay, how are we going to address this? That was our challenge, okay. So we were learning, they were teaching us, basically we went in there to help them, but in the end they ended up helping us. That was the beauty of this case for us,
well,
okay.
yeah, because actually, Rosalia, we still have to obviously, when you say a middle path, a middle point between this colonial system and tradition, I'm saying that colonial system has to be done away with. There is no middle point. That's out. That's not cannot be part of any system. And then you talk about what we can learn from indigenous practices, how of course, people are part of communities. How do you have to understand them, you have to understand just the fact that, say, some incident like that happened, there's so much behind it, all that, and bringing the person, I mean, you have to be, the person still stays part of the community, but still some reform happens within the person in their own mind itself, and the way you deal with them. There's so much that just has to be picked up and said, look, how do we use this, instead of saying, okay, this system exists, now how do we balance it out? There is no balancing in some system which should not exist, not
But
even in
Vikram,
indigenous communities, anywhere. I'm
but
just saying
but
anywhere.
but 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 Vikram, the thing is, the challenge that we had, yes, the problem is that they were also using a colonial system within the reserve, because the peacekeeping structure is based on a colonial system, okay.
Yeah.
They're training, okay, and the way they work, and they have no choice because they're enforcing the law. They're enforcing the law on the reserve and even off the reserve. These guys, um, were not only enforcing, the peacekeepers were not only working on the reserve, they were also working in the adjacent communities attached, next to the reserve, okay. Because don't forget, I mean, this is a reserve which is outside of Montreal, okay, right off, on the south shore of Montreal, okay, on the other side of the river, okay. But Montreal is a big city with big city problems, okay, crime. This is what we were made privy to by them, okay. They would tell us the type of cases that they would explain to us, the type of cases they were confronted with. And let me tell you, it's some of the cases were gruesome. And these guys were, they were also called by, let's say, the police forces that were adjacent to the reserve to come and help them, because they had a reputation for being very strong-willed, strong-minded. They were able to break up brawls, fights in bars, okay, like very violent fights. These guys would walk in there because they were huge. They were big guys. Imagine like 6 feet something, okay, built like it was amazing. I had fun. They were. I still remember. And I'm petite, so I would be looking up at them sometimes. They were tough. They had tough characters. I had to break through that. Okay, imagine a police mindset. Okay, it's enforcement mindset. Okay, so you don't trust very easily. We had to break through that. We had to break through that mindset. It's a different mindset. You're not mediating with a civilian, okay, which is not exposed to the type of crimes that they're exposed to. Gruesome crimes, gruesome, because they gave us an insight of their day to day, and some of the stuff I was like, okay, I don't want to hear it. I can't handle it. It's too much for me, like some of the stuff, because we can't understand what the but so they were called because of they had the strength of character. They were tough, okay, they were brave. I said, you guys should be called I could see them, like my nickname for you is the brave peacekeepers. Like they were really brave men, okay. They would go into bars, like break up brawls in 2 seconds, whereas other police forces weren't able to do that. Okay, they would call upon them. They go lend a hand, in the communities next door to them, and that they take care of a situation and quickly and effectively, without even blinking an eye. That's and that's the reality that they lived with. But they also lived with other realities, like gruesome crimes. I still remember when I went into their headquarters. Okay, I saw this big poster, and it was missing Indigenous women. I never knew there were so many missing Indigenous women in this was across Canada. I didn't realize. I said, my God, they had pictures of missing or murdered Indigenous women. Okay, you should see how the poster took up, I don't know, a big portion of the wall. And I was like, I still remember looking at it, and I'm just looking at it, and I'm observing this as I was waiting for us to be let in, into because it's you're going into their headquarters, so it's sort of a secure environment, because there's jail cells there, in their headquarters. You're going into an enforcement minded, you're going into an enforcement, building, let's say. Okay, there's jail cells basically, so you can't just walk in. You're at the reception desk, and you have to be let in. You have to be announced, and you have to be let in inside. You have into a secure environment. So as I'm waiting, I'm looking at this, and I start asking. I was observing, like I said, for me it was a learning experience. So I start asking. I don't understand, how come there's so many missing and murdered Indigenous women? Why Indigenous women? Like it was just a learning experience for me. I couldn't understand, and I'm coming in with a different mindset. It's like things that I've never been exposed to, with things that you and I, someone like myself, would take for granted, and so it makes you aware, more aware of the mindset, like where they're coming from, and why there are certain behaviors, why they don't, sometimes you have to earn their trust. Basically, you can't just, like I said, you can't just walk in and, okay, I'm going to work like this, and that. No, it's not going to work. you know.
But Rosalia, what was the reason for all these murder or missing Indigenous women? Was there something that came out from it?
Uh, the reason a lot of them, there's a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of indigenous, not only women, but indigenous, they're used to being on the reserve. Okay, so when a lot of them get off the reserve, they're not. Some of them are not well equipped to live, let's say, in a city, or they get. There's a lot of there's the issues of alcohol abuse, prostitution, and there's a lot of social issues, social factors. Okay, some of them have been forced into prostitution, and then they go missing because there's violence associated with that. A lot of them, especially out west, in the western part of Canada is huge. It's humongous territory. There's there are places which are which you would call not uninhabited but isolated, and they'll become involved in they'll dive into, some of them, like I said, they'll come into the city, and they're not used to they're used to living on a reserve. All of a sudden they're in a big city. Okay, they'll come in, some of them for medical treatment, or they're leaving an abusive situation in their families, because there's issues of alcohol abuse that go back to, again, colonialism. That goes back to the fur trade, hundreds of years, when the colonialists came here to Canada. They started trading with the Indigenous, okay, for the fur, the fur trade, and they would give them alcohol. They would exchange alcohol for fur. So they weren't used to alcohol and in their system, and basically a lot of them, there's alcoholism, there's substance abuse, and it goes from alcohol to drugs, and you name it. So because of those type of issues, a lot of these women off the reserves would get involved in it could be prostitution, it could be they just go missing. They'd meet up with, I don't know, out west there were also cases of serial killing, you name it, anything could happen. They weren't, let's just say, prepared to deal with big city life, coming from a more protected environment on a reserve, let's say. It's a combination of factors. It's not just one issue,
But when you say that Canada is big, there was this video, which I didn't see the whole thing. A train journey from Toronto to Vancouver takes 5 days. There's a journey like that.
By car.
Train. There's a train.
Yeah.
There's a train. A 5-day
But
train.
you're talking Toronto. That's the middle. That's almost the middle of Canada. That's eastern. That's southeastern Canada. But you're forgetting all the everything east of Toronto.
Yeah.
You're forgetting Quebec. You're forgetting the Maritimes.
Exactly. So
It goes
Toronto to
way,
Vancouver.
Yeah, that's almost half of Canada. You're almost slicing it in half.
No, a little more. Come on, Rosalia. Toronto is still quite east. It's quite east.
Yeah, but you know how much? If you pull up a map of Canada, you'll see how huge it is. It's humongous.
I know. That's what I'm saying. That's huge.
And then the northern territories are isolated, sort of. They're small communities. There's pockets of communities.
Yep.
So imagine somebody coming from an Inuit coming from a very northern territory, coming into a city like Montreal, because we get a lot of Inuits here. They come here for medical because they don't have all the infrastructure that we have here. Okay, because they're small communities, they're on a reserve. They'll be flown down, let's say, to a city like Montreal. Okay, and they come in for medical services. Okay, they'll be put up in a hotel. Here you are, you're coming from an isolated reserve, and you're coming into a huge city, okay, with everything at your disposal, entertainment. You know, you don't want to go, some of them don't want to go back right away, you know, but they're not equipped, you know, and they fall into the trap of big cities, you know, and some of them become homeless because you know, they're already involved in a little bit of substance abuse, and then it becomes a big problem, and they become homeless. And what happens to them? Many of them either die, they disappear. You know, there's violence on the street, especially if you're living, you know, on the street. There's a lot of violence, especially towards women. Anything from rape to, you know, and that's why the list gets bigger. You know, that's why it's such a huge list. I mean, I can't. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I can't name all the. But there's a variety of factors. You know.
Yeah. But Rosalia, the important thing is, I'm not going to be able to take that journey. I'm in this online world, but please go for this journey from Montreal to Vancouver on this 5-day
I
train.
did.
You did?
I didn't take it by train. It's a beautiful train ride. If you ever come to Canada, it's fantastic, especially when you get to the Mountaineer. It's a little expensive, but it's beautiful. I mean, you'll get to see the beauty of Canada. I remember when I flew to Vancouver. I had to fly I had some meetings there, and I still remember when I went, and I was just astounded by the beauty of Vancouver, the mountains, the ocean. I was looking at the West Coast. I was like, I went to point zero, you know, where it's, or, you know, mile one, you know. I have a picture there actually. I was standing on the rock. I said, "This is mile one. Wow!" From, you know, now I have to go to mile one at the other end, all the way to PEI and, you know, the Maritime. That's my next trip. But if you ever have, you know, it's such, and that's when you realize why there's so much reverence by the Indigenous communities for nature. I mean, it's just overwhelming how beautiful the land is. It's just astounding, you know.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. I mean, traveling through Canada must be really nice.
It is. It's you know, I mean, I live in a big city, so I don't get to connect with nature as much as somebody that's living really, let's say, close to the mountains or the beach. And I mean, so when I had that opportunity, I realized, I still remember being in, was it Kamloops? No, it wasn't Kamloops, Campbellton. I still remember being in Campbellton, and I still remember that hotel because I was able to open the windows, and I remember sleeping that night. I mean, the mountain air was it was so fresh, and I never slept so well in my life. Like I was breathing like clean, clear air. So I can understand the attachment to the environment, how important, you know, the respect for the environment is. It's when you go to these places and you see the beauty of nature, you know, how it makes you realize, you know, how we have to revere and respect, you know, like, as they say, Mother Earth. And you only realize it when you see the beauty of the, you know.
I think the main thing is that on one end, when we talk about the laws and this colonial laws, actually having to just do away with it and looking at it totally with a fresh thing in terms of legislation and everything. Same thing with living. I mean, the whole concept of developing cities the way they've developed. I mean, maybe you just have to do away with that and say, how can we actually connect to nature and live in a manner which, like you said, just breathe fresh air. You can't imagine what our air is like. We are the most Delhi is the most polluted city in the world. And when I look at the AQI of Delhi and I look at other places, I'm like amazed. There is a certain point in the year where our AQI sometimes goes to 400, 350, things like that. And then at the same time, you look at cities where it's 20, 30. It's like, wow. I mean, so there is a different world out there, which we've created this other world, which we need to totally relook at. And similarly with mediation, we have to relook at the way mediation has gone. And of course, this symposium is part of that series to understand that, look, this can also be done in this way. So I think re-looking at things is what we need to do. That's what I'm trying to put across with these series. And then let's take it in a direction which, I think it's
Vikram, holding a mediation in nature, it would be a beautiful experience. Can you imagine? Last summer, I was invited. I'll just give you a quick anecdote. I have a good friend of mine that bought a chalet outside of. It's in Quebec, okay, but it's by a lake, okay. So she invited me, for a couple of days to her chalet, okay. So I said, okay, I'll go. And what an experience, okay. Here I am. I'm a city slicker. I'm really. I grew up in the city. I'm used to, pavement, whatever, I live in the city. Okay. So I went to her chalet and, she took me hiking. Well, first of all, her chalet was literally on a lake. Okay. So we were swimming in the lake. Okay, we get up in the morning, we go on the dock, and I was like, oh my God, we'd be just stretching on the dock. Okay, and then she says, okay, we're gonna go canoeing. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't gone canoeing since I was a teenager, But when I'd go canoeing, it wasn't on a lake; it would be on a small
stream
flow of land, like man-made lake outside of the city. There's no current. I was terrified. Okay, so here I am in the middle of the lake. Okay, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a current. Well, oh, no kidding, there's a current. You're on the lake, So I was, she's teaching me how to paddle. This was what an amazing experience. It was wonderful. Okay, so you realize, that you have to succumb to nature. And there were 3 loons. There was a family of loons. Okay, and they were always. It was, they were always coming by. Oh, have you ever heard loons? It's one of the national symbols of Canada. And I realized, oh my God, those are loons. We have them on our coins. Like that's why they call it the loonie, the dollar coin of Canada. Okay, it's a big bird. They're beautiful. They're majestic. And we'd hear this family, and it's like, so I remember being on the lake, and I go, I'm going to follow those loons. And as I was following them, I realized the current is getting stronger and stronger, and we're pulling away from, the dock. Okay, I'm in the middle of the lake, and I'm like, how am I going to get back to that dock? I couldn't. I was having issues with, paddling. I said, so I got scared. I was like, my God, I don't know if I'll be able to return, with the current is taking me along, I'm going with the flow, basically. It was very humbling. But I managed to return to the dock, and I realized how we have to adapt to nature. And with that mindset, that's how I see us adapting to the indigenous. That's a loom. Yeah, that's exactly the first one right here. The first one on the left. That's it. They're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. And the sound. They were crooning, so we'd be responding to them.
I think
so
I like.
Pardon?
I like the fact that you said when you went to the reserve that you're discussing, maybe not doing the mediation, but having discussions in restaurants and homes and parks. That's the way, that's how informal mediation itself has to be. That's what I'm saying. We have to relook at it. That's the whole idea about putting this world mediation circle, looking at the whole concept differently. Okay, this world has been created around mediation, whatever, that world exists. A parallel world can be created which I've written on my website also, the humanistic, values-based approach to mediation. You are talking about interest-based. I'm saying let's go values-based. Let's look at that. So there's so much more to happen there. So I think we need this. Interesting.
Well, that's why from the discussions that you're having through this symposium, this is the trend that I'm seeing, that we need to learn from one another. And I think something can come out of it. Exactly. Going from an interest-based mediations to value-based mediation. That could be something that someone can look into. Then it's going to become.
Well, there is, of course, a book that a lot of people read in relation to mediation. I'm going to change the name. A new book that I'll come. I mean, of course, I won't be able to come out it. Let me see how I can put it together. But getting to a hug. Let's, instead of getting to a yes, let's go to getting to a hug. That's the way it should
Getting
be.
to
To a hug. Hugging,
hug.
yeah, hug, hug each other, to reach that point when you get into a mediation. So let's see, that's we'll put it together, all these things that we're discussing, and as we go along.
But getting to hugging, that takes time, because
That's
you
the
have
whole
to
idea
rebuild.
that you just said. The time should not be a factor.
But you
Time
know
should.
what? You know what? You pegged it, because when I was involved in that's exactly it. That's where we were building relations. Okay, we were we were building relations with I don't want to say our clients, with it's too distance when you say our clients.
Yeah, exactly.
Distance
We have to move away from those words. Yeah, clients and
I don't.
parties, we have to move away from those words.
No, we weren't calling it parties.
Yeah, we're
We
not.
were building relations, okay, with
Yeah.
with the people that we were meeting with, okay, because we were, we had to create trust, but then we had to rebuild. We had to help to rebuild their relationship among themselves, and for that, like I said, we gave recommendations, and we did do some awareness sessions. But for other stuff, we had to call in reinforcements that were well versed in their culture, that they can also relate to, because, like I said, we were not. We were well versed in interest-based mediation, but not community or you know indigenous, practices, basically.
Oh, good. I think that's been nice. So your experience, bringing out your experience, has been important. But at this point, Rosalia, one concluding kind of thing. Because look, our conversations will. It's like one of those session that we had on in conversation with a beautiful mind, and it'll go on. So maybe at this stage we'll conclude this particular session of the symposium. So how would you want to conclude it? Any concluding remarks?
Well, the concluding remarks would be that there's a lot of work to be done. There's so much. We're just starting to scratch the surface. The beauty of it is that Vikram, you've already tapped into many. You've had what I say tapped in, I should say you connected with many. I'm so impressed with the speakers that you've had on this panel, and like I said, I'm humbled to be here, because I don't consider myself at their caliber, and I think, we can learn from each other, we can learn from them, and if everybody contributes, something, I think something good could come out of this, something constructive, so we can move forward. You have created a mediation revolution. I honestly, okay, and I love the circle, because it represents not only the indigenous mindset, that everything is circular, with the four corners, like earth. I can't remember all the four structures. Like, I know there's earth, there's the sun, I think the moon. I can't remember now. It's just not coming to me. But I know that your other panelists will be able to correct me on that. So I feel like it's not only, it's not just within the indigenous circle, but worldwide, So I think if we all come together as a community of mediators, we all have something to contribute, and I think we could create something beautiful, basically. And
Oh, yeah, yes. Actually, I mean, like I said, we look at it totally differently. Don't carry baggage with you when you're looking at things like this, looking at it from a fresh mind, pick up the good things from wherever, put it all together. So that's what we're going to do. So thank you very much, Rosalia. Nice words to end it on. I feel happy when I hear good words. Of course, in appreciation always feels good. So thank you very much. And of course, please be part of the last session on the 31st.
I will
And
try.
your learnings and key takeaways is important because, I mean, just the fact that everyone picks up different things from each session, and it's important to bring that out because I mean, some people miss out on certain things, some people miss out on sessions itself to watch sessions. So it's a good thing to bring that all together. So thank you very much, and say hi to Khalid from my side.
I will.
Haven't seen him for quite some time. So
Well, he's been busy working at the, selling his comics.